My golden sister set up my husband's affair, but I exposed her scheme and ruined her connections. My name's Lisa. I'm 26. And up until recently, life had been playing out smoothly, like a familiar tune on repeat. Work, home, and future plans with my husband, Alex, also 26. Everything was lined up neatly, just like we'd imagined. No wild drama, no surprises, just life following a steady, straight line. Now I have an older sister, Sarah, 2 years my senior. Growing up, Sarah was the shining star of our family, practically the golden child. My parents have always been completely smitten with her. In their eyes, she's destined for greatness, someone who might just save the world single-handedly. They spoke about her achievements like they were the solution to every problem, big or small. Sarah could do no wrong. To them, she was almost Nobel-worthy, the genius of the family, the one who could do it all. She was the answer, and honestly, I got used to it. I let them adore her, shower her with praise. It didn't really bother me. I never felt the need to compete, though I never quite understood what made her so perfect in their eyes. But as we both grew older, I began to see a side of Sarah that didn't quite match her angelic reputation. It wasn't obvious at first, just subtle changes, but over time, things started to feel different, strange even. Recently, her behavior took a turn that was hard to ignore. At first, it was just minor stuff. She started staying over at our place more frequently than usual, lingering for hours on end. At times, it seemed like she was eavesdropping on conversations between Alex and me, almost like she was searching for something. Then, I started noticing these odd, lingering glances she'd throw at my husband, moments where her gaze would lock onto him in a way that felt far from sisterly. Her eyes would linger just a little too long, like she was analyzing him. At first, I brushed it off, assuming I was reading too much into things. But those glances turned sharper, more intense, until it felt as if her eyes were practically scanning him, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, she struck up a conversation with him, tossing in a casual, innocent-sounding compliment at the end, something like, "You're so lucky to have him, Lisa." She said it with a smile, but it didn't feel like a compliment. There was a hint of something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It felt like she was testing the waters, watching my reaction. I laughed it off, but I could feel my unease bubbling up. That, however, was just the start. The tipping point came one afternoon when I walked into the living room and saw her sitting there, completely comfortable, scrolling through Alex's phone. She looked as if she owned the place, sprawled on our couch like she'd done it 100 times before, staring intently at the screen. For a moment, I just froze, trying to process what I was seeing. When she finally noticed me standing there, she put on the most exaggerated look of surprise I've ever seen and stammered out, "Oh, sorry, Lisa. I didn't even realize I picked it up. I must have done it by accident." Her excuse was so flimsy it was almost laughable. I just stood there, feeling a chill run down my spine. Sarah, my golden sister, was now sitting on my couch, scrolling through my husband's phone. And it felt like a line had been crossed, one that we couldn't come back from. In that moment, I knew, without a doubt, that something was seriously wrong. And I couldn't help but wonder, how much longer had this been going on? And what was she really after? A few days later, Alex came home looking like he'd gone through a battle and lost. Face pale, shoulders heavy, eyes carrying a weight I'd never seen before. He dropped his bag, slumped into a chair across from me, and just stared at the table, his jaw clenched like he was trying to hold something back. Silence stretched between us, thick with tension. Finally, he spoke, his voice almost cold. "Someone told me you're being unfaithful." No warning, no hesitation, just those words landing with the force of a hammer. Told him, as if it was fact, no room for doubt or clarification, like a done deal. And who was this mysterious source of information? None other than Sarah. Our lovely, ever-perfect, golden Sarah, of course. I could almost see her face as he spoke, her eyes narrowed, serious, delivering her version of the truth. Alex's tone was strange, detached, like he was reporting some unpleasant news he'd overheard. It wasn't the hurt or betrayal I expected. It was colder, as if he'd already decided I was guilty. I tried to keep my voice steady, asking him where he got this absurd idea, and he replied, "Sarah said she saw you with some guy." Sarah had been feeding him this story. I could picture her perfectly, sitting with him, looking all concerned and self-righteous, her voice full of earnest concern, lips pursed as she shared her revelation. It was all so calculated, so meticulously crafted. She was playing her part, the caring sister, swooping in to save him from the wife who supposedly betrayed him. Alex sat there, his expression clouded, like he was bracing himself for a confession. The shock, the disbelief, all those emotions I'd held back came rushing forward, swirling into a cold, burning anger. Every assumption I'd ever held about Sarah, every bit of faith I'd placed in her, crumbled like ash. I'd always known she had a way of stealing the spotlight, but this was something else. This was vicious. I tried to make him see the truth, explaining that this was all nonsense, a fabrication. But as I spoke, I could see it in his eyes, the doubt, the quiet yet unmistakable certainty that was now etched into his mind. Sarah had poisoned him against me, weaving her story so convincingly that it clung to him, burying any trust we'd had. It was like she'd planted a seed in his mind, and it was now taking root, growing, shading over every word I said. There he sat, looking at me as if I was a stranger, his expression carved with resignation, almost like he was listening out of duty, not belief. My words bounced off him, powerless against the story she'd spun. A week slipped by, and our home had transformed into an ice-cold hell, colder inside than the winter chill outside. Silence filled every room, each corner thick with unspoken accusations. We weren't a married couple anymore. We were two strangers sharing a space separated by an iceberg the size of the Titanic. Every interaction felt forced, strained, words frozen and chiseled out one by one, stiff with tension. And his eyes, those eyes that used to look at me with warmth, now watched me as if I were some distant, foreign stranger, a mystery he couldn't or didn't want to understand. And right when I thought it couldn't get worse, Sarah swooped in, the so-called hero of the family. Like clockwork, she'd appear at our door, stepping in with a look of saintly sympathy, as though her only purpose was to comfort Alex in his time of need. Every day, without fail, she was there. It was as if she had timed her visits perfectly for when his mood seemed lowest, her voice softly saying, "You deserve better, Alex." Or some other line that sounded like it came straight out of a soap opera. But she said it so convincingly, with that slight shake of the head and her soft, concerned glances. Her act was flawless. She'd lower her voice, casting concerned looks his way, sometimes touching his arm gently as if he were fragile, a broken man in desperate need of rescue. And she didn't have to say it out loud. Her gaze spoke volumes. "I'm here for you, Alex," her eyes would say. "And I'd never betray you like she did." She was careful not to say anything too direct, but it was all there in her gestures, her quiet tones, the way she'd lean in just a bit closer than necessary. There were moments I couldn't avoid overhearing bits of their hushed conversations. I'd hear her whisper things like, "You know I'll always be here if you need someone to talk to." And it made my skin crawl. The message was clear. She was his reliable rock, his unwavering support, the one he could trust when all else failed. Watching her so smoothly weave herself into our lives like that was like watching a play unfold, a carefully rehearsed performance where every look and touch was calculated for maximum impact. She was brilliant, I'll give her that. Whenever she hugged him, stroked his arm, or gave him that look of pure, saintly concern, I could see Alex's face soften, his guard drop just a little. He began to look at her with a kind of gratitude I hadn't seen before, a new appreciation. It was like he was clinging to her presence, his only light in this darkness that had crept into our home. It was surreal. Sarah, my own sister, was slowly but surely invading every part of my life, slipping between me and my husband like a shadow that wouldn't disappear. She wasn't my sister anymore. She was the very nightmare clawing her way into my marriage, with every gentle touch, every concerned glance. Even my parents had fallen completely under Sarah's spell. My so-called unreliability had suddenly become the hot topic at every family gathering. The "you're our smart one, Lisa" comments disappeared overnight, replaced by worried glances and suspicious murmurs. All those years of their little praises and "you're the grounded one, Lisa" were gone. Now, the spotlight was firmly on the golden child once again. Sarah, who always knows best. It was like they couldn't see the person they raised. Instead, they saw me as some ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. The peak of it all happened at a family dinner. Sarah went all out, putting on her performance like she was vying for an Oscar. With wide eyes and a tremble in her voice, she launched into a heart-wrenching story about how she accidentally noticed some strange behavior in me and felt it was her moral obligation to inform Alex for his own good. She went on and on, her voice shaking at just the right moments, as if she were genuinely pained to be saying these things. It was beyond fake. It was like watching a live theatrical performance of pure manipulation. She even threw in a few deep breaths, her eyes glossing over, adding that extra touch to make her lies shine with faux sincerity. I sat there watching her, doing everything in my power not to roll my eyes or choke on the sheer amount of sarcasm that was bubbling up inside me. She spoke like some kind of martyr, as if her actions were all for love and protection. It was ridiculous and painfully brilliant. It was like she had swapped out her conscience for a talent to lie with such a saintly expression. Every time she looked around the table, I could see the satisfaction glinting in her eyes. She knew she had everyone wrapped around her finger, nodding along with her tragic revelation. My parents ate it up. They sat there, nodding solemnly, eyes wide, fully captivated by her tale. To them, she was the concerned sister, doing the noble thing to protect both her sister and her poor betrayed brother-in-law. "I just had to tell him," and "I couldn't bear to see you hurt, Alex," had them nodding with sympathy, completely convinced of her selflessness. The perfect audience, clinging to every word she said like gospel. And there I was, boiling inside, every part of me fighting the urge to finally tell them the truth, to rip off the mask Sarah wore so well. It was in that moment that something snapped inside me. I couldn't let this continue. Sarah might have everyone fooled, playing the saint while turning my own family against me, but I wasn't about to let her destroy my life for her personal show. I knew right then that I was done standing by, watching as she twisted every truth, lied through every smile, and clawed her way deeper into my life. It was time to dig up the truth, to expose her for the manipulator she was. My paranoia was through the roof. Every single thing Sarah did seemed tainted with some hidden motive. Every smile felt like a mask concealing a scheme. I started obsessing over her every move, tracking every glance, every gesture, every time she reached out a bit too closely toward Alex. She was way too friendly with him, her comfort visits becoming an everyday ritual. And the worst part? The constant whispering between them. At the kitchen table, they'd sit close, their heads almost touching, talking in hushed voices as if they were keeping some shared secret. I felt like an outsider in my own home, helplessly watching as my sister tried to replace me right before my eyes. One day, as they were deep into one of their little tea ceremonies, I couldn't stand it anymore. I decided to creep closer, hoping to catch even a snippet of their conversation. My heart was pounding as I got close enough to hear. Sarah was talking to him in this gentle, syrupy tone, almost like she was telling him the deepest truths of the universe. Her voice was soft and full of concern, every word dripping with care. "You deserve better, Alex," she said, her tone full of fake empathy. "There are people who love you truly, you know?" It was pure manipulation, right out of a classic playbook. She was practically handing him a script to follow, guiding him towards some idea that he'd be better off without me. I wanted to storm in, to scream at her, to throw her out of my house. But deep down, I knew it would only work in her favor. She'd play the victim, painting me as the unhinged one, while she was the innocent sister just trying to help. She was smart, calculating enough to set up a perfect trap. I could feel it closing in around me, and it was maddening. She was laying the groundwork with precision, carefully sowing seeds of doubt in Alex's mind. And Alex? He wasn't smiling. He wasn't eagerly nodding along, but I could tell her words were getting to him. Slowly, piece by piece, he was starting to question things, the trust we'd had for each other now twisted and tangled by her gentle whispers. I was becoming the outsider, the undeserving element she hinted was holding him back. And yet, I had nothing. No proof, no recordings, not a single piece of solid evidence that could show anyone what was really happening. All I had was my gut, that aching, burning knowledge that I was the only one seeing through her act. She'd crafted it so well, her lies wrapped in sweet, sugar-coated concern, while I stood alone with the truth, powerless to prove what I knew in my heart. I knew that in war, all's fair. If Sarah was determined to put on a drama of deceit and manipulation, I, as the audience, had to find dirt on this queen of righteousness. So I did a little digging. Nothing crazy. Just a night with her social media, old photo albums, and messages. I was looking for anything that showed her real side. And guess what? I found some juicy stuff. Turns out, Sarah wasn't just the comforter and sisterly friend she pretended to be. She was a homewrecker with experience. This little angel had messed with other people's lives more than once, as if she was on some mission. Every photo with ex-friends and their boyfriends had that same smirk, as if saying, "Let me just fix this for you." And the comments under her posts from old friends had a similar tone. Friendships with her ended in drama, usually after some absurd conflict where she, of course, was just trying to help. What used to seem minor now looked like a pattern. Classic tactics: get close, ruin everything, and leave, like a scorched earth strategy. While it wasn't undeniable proof, it was something. I gathered everything I could: screenshots, messages, photos, a whole dossier on our family saint. The moment of truth arrived, and I waited until Alex was calm enough to process all this. That night, he was tired and quiet, so the moment felt right. "Alex, we need to talk." I sat across from him, feeling like a lawyer about to reveal shocking evidence to the jury. He looked at me skeptically, but I pressed on. I pulled up the messages, old photos of Sarah with her ex-friends, sarcastic comments, the whole portfolio of a serial manipulator. "Here, take a look. This is your Sarah, your hero." I showed him her posts, where she'd portrayed herself as a savior, only to leave friendships in ashes. Alex's face turned pale, his expression stunned. Yes, he was shocked, but it took a lot for him to admit the truth. Sarah had planted her lies in his mind like a tattoo. "You don't understand. She's still my sister," he finally said, as if it could all be a coincidence. But now doubt was creeping in. I could see it in his eyes, the moment he realized something didn't add up. Then fate stepped in. One day, Alex walked into the kitchen and caught Sarah texting his best friend. Not just chatting, but discussing how her family drama was going according to plan and how well she was progressing in ruining our relationship. Like it was her personal reality show. That moment was her undoing. He caught her in the act, and this time, there was no way out. When the truth finally came out, it was like a bomb exploded in the family. A shock. An epic finale of a drama series no one expected to see in real life. My golden sister, the paragon of purity, turned out to be a snake. Not just any snake, but a full-blown cobra who'd been hiding her venomous nature for years. The family learned that her noble mission was nothing but another act. She'd torn apart our marriage just to look like a hero in our parents' eyes, hoping to elevate her status even more. And guess what? The parents who used to shower her with praise were, to put it mildly, stunned. Their perfect Sarah turned out to be a master manipulator and instigator, and her righteous concern was just smoke and mirrors. At that moment, it was like they woke up from a trance and realized who they'd put on a pedestal all these years. And Alex? Yes, we had our final talk, and that was the nail in her reputation's coffin. He gave her a few harsh words and completely cut ties with her. Now Sarah was nothing to him. She was left alone, without her perfect mask or the usual parental support. All her ideal circle collapsed like a house of cards. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe after a long, grueling battle. No more setups, no more cheap tricks, just the truth she tried so hard to bury.